the elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing chaos that shouldn't exist in a corporate penthouse worth $20 million. Everett Sinclair paced frantically, his Italian leather shoes wearing an invisible path into the marble floor as he barked orders into his phone. His usually perfect silver-streaked hair stuck out at odd angles from running his fingers through it repeatedly. The 20-minute countdown on the massive wall clock seemed to mock him with each passing second. "What do you mean there's no replacement? The Montgomery contract is worth $300 million. Everett's voice cracked with desperation, a sound his employees had never heard from the man who built Sinclair Enterprises from nothing into a financial powerhouse. Thalia Merrick kept her eyes down as she maneuvered her cleaning cart around the frantic executives rushing through the hallway. She had learned to make herself invisible during the 6 months she'd worked for Elite Cleaning Services. Being invisible was safer than being noticed. Being invisible meant surviving another day to put food on the table for Phoenix. Her son's face flashed in her mind, his gap-toothed smile when she'd dropped him at school this morning, promising to be there for his science presentation later. A promise she intended to keep, unlike the countless ones broken by Sterling before everything fell apart. "Sir, I've called every translation service in the city. With the International Tech Conference in town, there's simply no one available on such short notice who's qualified for financial discussions of this magnitude." Everett's assistant, a young man whose name tag read Wesley, looked as if he might burst into tears. "Mr. Donovan, your usual translator, is still unconscious after his car accident. The doctors say—" "I don't care what the doctors say," Everett snapped, then immediately pressed his fingertips against his temples. "I'm sorry, Wesley. That was uncalled for. Of course I care about Donovan, but these British investors are landing in 15 minutes. The meeting starts in 20. Without someone fluent in both English and financial terminology, we're dead in the water." Thalia's hand stilled on the glass door she was cleaning. Her reflection stared back at her, blue eyes that had once commanded boardrooms, now framed by the pink uniform cap of Elite Cleaning Services. For 6 months, she'd kept her head down, accepted being treated as part of the furniture, pretending she didn't understand the complex business discussions happening around her. 6 months of starting over after Sterling's fraud had destroyed everything she'd built. 6 months of whispers following her wherever she went in the financial district, of former colleagues crossing the street to avoid her. Sterling Caldwell's wife must have known. No way she wasn't involved. 34 and finished in this industry forever. "Sir, Octavia Harrington is particularly strict about conducting these negotiations in her native British English. You know how she feels about potential misunderstandings." Wesley's voice dropped, and after what happened with the Japanese contract last year, Everett collapsed into a chair, loosening his tie. "That was one mistranslated clause. One, and it cost us $40 million. He glanced at the clock again. 13 minutes now. We're finished. Thalia's mind raced through the practical consequences of what she was considering. She needed this cleaning job. Phoenix needed stability after everything they'd been through. The court-ordered therapist had emphasized routine and security for children affected by trauma. If she revealed herself now, spoke up, stepped out of invisibility, there would be no going back. "I can't believe this. 3 years of work. Our entire international expansion. Everything we've built could collapse because of one car accident." Everett's voice had gone hollow. Something shifted inside Thalia. Perhaps it was the memory of Phoenix asking last week why they couldn't go back to their old apartment with the rooftop garden where he'd kept his telescope. Perhaps it was remembering the woman she used to be before Sterling's actions had swept her identity away like a tsunami. Or perhaps it was simply the practical mathematics of knowing her minimum wage cleaning job would never be enough to give Phoenix the future he deserved. "I speak English," Thalia said, her voice clearer and more authoritative than it had been in months. The room fell silent. She set down her cleaning cloth and turned to face the startled executives. Fluently. "I worked in London for a decade. Everett looked up slowly, as if just noticing her presence for the first time, despite her having cleaned his office daily for months. "You... what?" I said. "I speak English, native-level fluency, with financial terminology expertise." See, she removed her cleaning cap, allowing her dark hair to fall free of its constraints. "I also have extensive experience with international contract negotiations." Wesley snorted. "With all due respect, ma'am, these are extremely sophisticated financial instruments we're discussing. Mrs. Harrington is bringing over a team of Oxford-educated financial analysts, and I have a double master's from Wharton in international business and finance," Thalia interrupted, keeping her eyes on Everett. "And I worked directly with Octavia Harrington 3 years ago on the Pentacorp merger. She prefers Earl Grey tea with a slice of lemon. No milk. Keeps a fountain pen from her father in her right jacket pocket for signing contracts, and has a rather amusing habit of saying tickety-boo when she's satisfied with deal points." Everett stood slowly, studying her with new eyes. "Who are you?" Thalia hesitated. This was the moment. Step back into invisibility, or reclaim a piece of herself. Phoenix's face flashed in her mind again. His science project on space exploration. His dreams of becoming an astronaut someday. Dreams that required opportunities she couldn't provide on a cleaner's salary. "My name is Thalia Merrick, previously Chief Operations Officer at Redbridge International." She watched the recognition dawn in Everett's eyes, followed immediately by the familiar shadow of judgment. "Yes, that Merrick. Sterling Caldwell's ex-wife. I had nothing to do with his financial crimes, but that distinction doesn't matter much in our industry, does it?" The silence stretched uncomfortably until Wesley whispered, "She's the one whose husband embezzled all that money and fled to—" "I know who she is," Everett cut him off sharply. His eyes never left Thalia's face. "Redbridge was a powerhouse until the scandal. You handled their Asian expansion, if I recall correctly. I built their Asian division from the ground up. 15 offices, 2,000 employees, $1 billion in annual revenue within 4 years. Thalia spoke without pride or defensiveness, just facts. Then Sterling committed fraud, implicated me despite my innocence, and I lost my career, reputation, savings, and home in the subsequent legal battles, proving I wasn't involved." The clock on the wall chimed a 10-minute warning. Everett ran a hand through his hair again, clearly torn. "You have 10 minutes until Octavia Harrington arrives to discuss a $300 million deal that will either save or sink your company," Thalia said matter-of-factly. "I'm offering to help. Whether you trust me or not is your decision." "How do I know you won't sabotage this intentionally? Corporate espionage is—" "I clean toilets for minimum wage now, Mr. Sinclair." Thalia's voice remained steady. "My son eats macaroni and cheese 4 nights a week because it's what we can afford. I have nothing left to lose, but you have everything. And for what it's worth, I was fully cleared of all charges. My only crime was trusting my husband." Everett glanced at the clock again. 8 minutes. He turned to Wesley. "Get her a company badge, and find her something to wear besides that uniform." He looked back at Thalia, his expression unreadable. "If you're half as good as your reputation once was, Mrs. Merrick, we might both get something we need today." As Wesley rushed to fulfill the orders, Everett added in a lower voice, "But understand this. If you make me regret this decision, I will ensure you never work in this city again, not even cleaning toilets." Thalia nodded once. "Fair enough." She pulled her phone from her pocket and quickly texted her supervisor at Elite Cleaning. "I need to let my boss know I'm stepping away, and I'll need to make a call regarding my son." "Make it quick," Everett said, already turning toward his office. "Conference room, 6 minutes." As Thalia dialed Phoenix's school to explain she'd be late for his presentation, she felt something unfamiliar stirring inside her chest. It took her a moment to recognize it as the faint embers of hope, a sensation she'd almost forgotten existed. The universe had handed her an unexpected door. All she had to do now was walk through it and prove that Thalia Merrick was far from finished. 7 minutes later, Thalia stood in the executive washroom, barely recognizing the woman staring back at her from the mirror. Wesley had produced a sleek charcoal pencil skirt and ivory silk blouse from the company's emergency wardrobe closet, kept for executives who spilled coffee before important meetings or needed to transition from day to evening events. The clothes fit surprisingly well, though the designer heels were half a size too large. A far cry from the pink uniform and sensible shoes she'd worn for the past 6 months. She smoothed a hand over her dark hair, now freed from its tight bun and falling in waves past her shoulders. "You can do this," she whispered to her reflection. A text message lit up her phone screen, Phoenix's teacher confirming they would delay his presentation until she could arrive. She had exactly 3 hours to help save Sinclair Enterprises and then make it across town for her son's moment of triumph. Failure wasn't an option on either front. The conference room door loomed before her like a portal to her former life. Thalia took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and entered with the confident stride that had once been as natural to her as breathing. The transformation was immediate and complete. Gone was the invisible cleaning woman, replaced by the executive who had once commanded respect across 3 continents. Everett looked up from his notes, momentarily startled by her metamorphosis. "Mrs. Merrick," he acknowledged with a nod that contained a hint of newfound respect. "I've had the team prepare these briefing materials. You have approximately 2 minutes to familiarize yourself with our proposal before the Harrington delegation arrives." Thalia accepted the tablet he offered, her mind instantly shifting into the analytical framework she'd developed during her years at Redbridge. She scanned the executive summary with practiced efficiency, identifying key points, potential sticking issues, and strategic leverage opportunities. "Your manufacturing capacity projections seem optimistic," she noted, swiping to the next page. "And your distribution timeline through European markets doesn't account for the new regulatory framework implemented last quarter." Everett's eyebrows rose slightly. "Those regulations aren't public knowledge yet. They will be next week," Thalia replied without looking up. "Octavia sits on the advisory committee that drafted them. She'll know they're coming and will factor them into her risk assessment." She continued scrolling through the documents, her mind working with a clarity and purpose she hadn't experienced since before Sterling's betrayal. "Your profit margins in Section 3 need revision. With current exchange rates and the supply chain disruptions in Southeast Asia, these numbers won't hold." Before Everett could respond, the reception desk called to announce Octavia Harrington's arrival. Thalia handed the tablet back to him, her face composed into a mask of professional neutrality. "Follow my lead on the regulatory questions. I'll signal if we need to pivot." The words flowed from her automatically, muscle memory from hundreds of high-stakes negotiations. Everett studied her for a beat longer than necessary. "I'm trusting you with my company, Mrs. Merrick. I understand the weight of that, Mr. Sinclair." And she did. Trust was a currency she'd once traded in freely, before learning its true value through catastrophic loss. The conference room doors opened to admit a formidable delegation of 5 British executives, led by Octavia Harrington, a tall, silver-haired woman with piercing gray eyes and the poised demeanor of someone accustomed to getting exactly what she wanted in every negotiation. Her gaze swept the room before landing on Thalia, momentary surprise flickering across her features before being replaced by cool assessment. "Mrs. Merrick," Octavia said, her British accent crisp and precise. "This is an unexpected development." Everett stepped forward. "Mrs. Harrington, welcome to Sinclair Enterprises. I see you're already acquainted with Mrs. Merrick, who will be facilitating our discussions today." "Indeed." Octavia placed her briefcase on the conference table without breaking eye contact with Thalia. "We worked rather closely on the Asian markets expansion some years ago, before certain unfortunate events." The subtext hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Thalia felt the weight of every assumption, every headline, every whispered accusation that had followed Sterling's crimes. For a moment, she was back in that courthouse, photographers shouting questions as she tried to shield Phoenix from their flashing cameras. But this wasn't about her past. This was about her future and her sons. Thalia extended her hand across the table. "It's good to see you again, Octavia. I believe we have substantial matters to discuss regarding Sinclair's expansion proposal." A heartbeat passed before Octavia accepted the handshake, her expression unreadable. "Yes, we certainly do." She turned to her team. "Shall we begin?" What followed was the most intensely focused 3 hours of Thalia's professional resurrection. She navigated the complex negotiations with the precision of a surgeon, anticipating Octavia's concerns before they were voiced, clarifying Everett's positions when communication faltered, and identifying compromise solutions that preserved the core interests of both parties. Her mind felt electrified, connections forming and strategies developing with a clarity she had almost forgotten she possessed. "The manufacturing capacity concerns in Section 2, Octavia noted, tapping her fountain pen against the document, the same pen Thalia had mentioned earlier. "These projections seem rather ambitious, given current market conditions." Thalia nodded. "We've adjusted the initial phase to account for that. If you'll turn to Appendix C, you'll see the revised implementation schedule with benchmark contingencies." She'd added these revisions during a brief recess, drawing on her knowledge of both Octavia's risk tolerance and the actual market conditions beyond what was in Sinclair's original materials. As the negotiations progressed, Thalia became aware of a subtle shift in the room's dynamics. Everett had begun deferring to her insights without hesitation. Octavia's team directed their technical questions to her, rather than to Sinclair's executives. Even Wesley, who had initially dismissed her capabilities, was furiously taking notes on her approach. "These distribution channel protections are quite innovative," Octavia remarked during the final hour, a note of genuine admiration in her voice. "Particularly the graduated exclusive rights provisions. Very elegant solution." "Thank you," Thalia replied, feeling a flush of professional pride she hadn't experienced in too long. "They provide security while maintaining flexibility as the partnership matures." When Octavia finally said, "Well, I believe we've addressed all the substantive issues. This appears tickety-boo from our perspective," Thalia caught Everett's startled glance at her accurate prediction of Octavia's peculiar expression of approval. The contract signing proceeded with ceremonial efficiency. Photographs were taken, handshakes exchanged, and pleasantries offered with genuine warmth that hadn't existed when the meeting began. $300 million would now flow between their companies, creating thousands of jobs and countless opportunities. All because a cleaning woman had stepped out of invisibility for one crucial afternoon. As the British delegation prepared to leave, Octavia held back, motioning for her team to proceed without her. When they were alone in the conference room with Everett, she fixed Thalia with a penetrating stare. "You were always brilliant, Thalia. One of the finest minds I've encountered in this industry." Her crisp voice softened slightly. "When everything happened with Sterling, many of us suspected you were collateral damage rather than complicit. But business is business, and association can be problematic." Thalia maintained her professional composure, though her heart raced. "I understand how the world works, Octavia." "Indeed." The older woman glanced at Everett. "Mr. Sinclair, you've found yourself quite an asset today. I wouldn't let this one return to cleaning services if I were you." With a final meaningful look at Thalia, she added, "The past can be a prison or a teacher, my dear. I'm pleased to see you've chosen the latter." After Octavia departed, silence filled the conference room. Thalia glanced at the clock. She had 40 minutes to cross town for Phoenix's presentation, if traffic cooperated. Already her mind was shifting back to her current reality, the cleaning job she would return to tomorrow, the apartment with the leaking ceiling, the mounting bills that kept her awake at night. "You just helped secure a $300 million deal," Everett said finally, his voice quiet with amazement. "The revisions you suggested will save us at least $30 million in implementation costs alone." not to mention avoiding the regulatory issues we hadn't anticipated. Thalia gathered her notes, keeping her tone professional. I'm glad I could help, Mr. Sinclair. If you could let Elite Cleaning Services know I completed my shift, I would appreciate it. I need to leave now to attend my son's school presentation. Your son? Everett seemed to be processing something, making connections. The boy you mentioned. How old is he? 8, Thalia replied, her expression softening. He's presenting his science project on space exploration today. It's very important to him that I'm there. Of course. Everett nodded, still watching her with that calculating expression she recognized from her years in corporate boardrooms. The look of someone reassessing an undervalued asset. My driver can take you. It'll be faster than public transportation. The offer surprised her. That's very kind, but not necessary. I insist. Everett pressed a button on the conference room phone. Wesley, have my car brought around immediately for Mrs. Merrick. He turned back to her. Consider it a small token of appreciation. 15 minutes later, Thalia sat in the back seat of a luxury sedan, moving efficiently through city traffic, still dressed in borrowed executive clothing that felt simultaneously foreign and familiar against her skin. The driver had strict instructions to wait and bring her home afterward. Another unexpected courtesy from Everett Sinclair. Her phone buzzed with a text from Phoenix's teacher. He's so excited you're coming. He's been telling everyone his mom used to work with astronauts. Thalia smiled, remembering how she'd once explained her business trips to her son when he was younger. Mommy helps people build things that go all around the world, just like astronauts go around the Earth. In his child's mind, this had transformed into a much more exciting narrative that she'd never had the heart to correct. As the car approached the school building, a modest structure in a neighborhood far removed from the gleaming skyscrapers downtown, Thalia caught her reflection in the window. For a few hours today, she had reclaimed a piece of herself she thought was gone forever. The competent, confident woman who could command a room and navigate complex problems with ease. The woman who existed before Sterling's crimes had reduced her to the disgraced executive's wife, and then the immigrant cleaning lady. But as the car stopped and she spotted Phoenix's eager face pressed against the classroom window, another truth became equally clear. No matter what happened with Everett Sinclair or Sinclair Enterprises tomorrow, her most important job was waiting for her inside that school building. And for the first time in months, she dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to excel at both. Phoenix's face lit up with wonderment as Thalia entered the classroom. His eyes widened at the sight of his mother in business attire instead of her usual cleaning uniform, and the sleek company car visible through the window had already caused excited whispers among his classmates. "Mom, you made it!" he exclaimed, rushing toward her with an enthusiasm that made her heart swell. For a moment, he forgot about Sinclair Enterprises, the $300 million contract, and the uncertain future that still loomed before them. All that mattered was the gap-toothed smile of her son and the pride shining in his eyes. "I promised I'd be here, didn't I?" Thalia knelt to his level, straightening the collar of his shirt, a habit she couldn't break, even as he grew increasingly independent. At 8 years old, Phoenix was the perfect blend of her determination and Sterling's creativity, thankfully without his father's moral flexibility. His science project, a detailed model of a space station with solar panels that actually rotated toward a light source, stood proudly on the display table. "Mrs. Howell said I'm presenting last because it's the coolest one," Phoenix whispered conspiratorially. "Is that your work outfit from before?" His small fingers touched the silk blouse reverently, his eyes full of questions about the mother he remembered from their life before everything changed. Before Thalia could respond, Mrs. Howell called the class to attention, and Phoenix scampered back to his seat. Throughout the other presentations, Thalia found her mind alternating between immense pride in her son and processing the surreal events of the afternoon. By the time Phoenix stood before his classmates explaining how his solar tracking system worked, Using terminology far beyond his years, she had reached no conclusions about what tomorrow might bring. But seeing him shine, watching the other parents nod with impressed expressions, she felt a certainty crystallize within her. Whatever happened, they would face it together, just as they had faced everything else. After the presentations, as Phoenix chatted excitedly with his teacher about possible improvements to his project, Thalia felt her phone vibrate in her pocket. The screen displayed a number she didn't recognize. "Thalia Merrick speaking," she answered professionally, stepping into the hallway for privacy. "Mrs. Merrick, this is Everett Sinclair." His voice sounded different, less commanding, more contemplative. "I hope I'm not interrupting your son's event. We're just wrapping up." "He did wonderfully." She kept her voice neutral, unsure where this conversation was heading. "I'm glad to hear it." A pause. "I've spent the last 2 hours reviewing your performance today and speaking with Octavia Harrington. She was quite impressed, as was I." "Thank you, Mr. Sinclair. I'd like to meet with you tomorrow morning to discuss a proposition. 9 o'clock at my office, if that's convenient." His tone made it clear this wasn't merely a courtesy call. Thalia's mind raced through possibilities. A consulting role? A recommendation to another firm? A bonus for today's work? "I'm scheduled to clean the 14th floor tomorrow morning." "That won't be necessary. I've already spoken with Elite Cleaning Services. You've been released from your contract with their full cooperation." Something in his voice suggested full cooperation had been assisted by financial incentives. A flicker of anger sparked within her. "Mr. Sinclair, while I appreciate the gesture, I need that job. I have responsibilities." "9 o'clock, Mrs. Merrick," he interrupted smoothly. "I assure you, what I have to propose will address your concerns about financial stability. The car will pick you up at 8:30. Before she could respond, Phoenix bounded out of the classroom, clutching his project and a blue ribbon. "Mom, I won first place. Mrs. Howell says I might qualify for the district science fair." Thalia quickly ended the call with a terse agreement to Sinclair's meeting and turned her full attention to her son's triumph. "That's amazing, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you." She embraced him tightly, inhaling the scent of school glue and the strawberry shampoo he insisted on using. "Can we get ice cream to celebrate?" Phoenix asked, his eyes hopeful. "The fancy kind with the little chocolate bits." On any other day, Thalia would have calculated the cost against their tight budget, weighing small luxuries against necessities. Today, after earning more in one afternoon than she would in 3 months of cleaning, she simply smiled. "Absolutely. The fancy kind with extra chocolate bits." The driver, who had waited patiently, took them to Phoenix's favorite ice cream parlor. As they sat at a small table by the window, Phoenix with his double scoop of Rocky Road, and Thalia with a modest cup of vanilla, her son studied her with unexpected seriousness. "Mom, are you going back to your old job? The one where you wore clothes like that and traveled on airplanes?" The question caught her off guard. For months, she'd protected Phoenix from the full reality of their situation, explaining her career change as a new adventure rather than the devastating necessity it was. "I'm not sure yet, sweetheart. Something interesting happened today, but I need to learn more about it tomorrow." Phoenix nodded, processing this with the same analytical focus he applied to his science projects. "I liked it when you had your big job. You smiled more." He licked his ice cream thoughtfully. "But I didn't like when you were gone a lot." The observation pierced Thalia's heart. In her previous life, 60-hour work weeks and international travel had been the norm. Sterling had been the more present parent, using his work-from-home consulting position as cover for his increasingly illegal financial activities, as she would later discover. "If I ever have an opportunity like that again," she said carefully, "we would figure it out together. Your happiness is the most important thing to me." "More important than space stations and solar panels?" Phoenix grinned, chocolate ice cream smudged on his chin. "Even more important than those," she assured him, wiping his face with a napkin. "Although those are pretty cool, too." That night, After tucking Phoenix into bed in their small two-bedroom apartment, Thalia finally allowed herself to fully process the day's events. She hung the borrowed clothes carefully on a hanger, preparing to return them tomorrow. The reflection in her bedroom mirror seemed caught between two worlds: the powerhouse executive she had once been and the struggling single mother she had become. She pulled out her laptop, one of the few valuable possessions she'd managed to keep after the legal battles, and began researching Sinclair Enterprises more thoroughly. Their financials were solid, but not spectacular. The Montgomery contract she'd helped secure today represented a major pivot into international markets, potentially tripling their valuation if executed properly. Everett Sinclair himself had a reputation as a demanding but fair leader who had built his company through strategic innovation rather than financial manipulation, a stark contrast to Sterling's methods. At 11:30, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Car confirmed for 8:30 a.m. ES. Formal, direct, efficient. Exactly what she would expect from Everett Sinclair based on their brief interaction. Sleep eluded her as possibilities and concerns battled for dominance in her mind. By 3 a.m., she found herself sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of tea growing cold beside her, as she drafted potential scenarios for tomorrow's meeting. If Sinclair offered her a position, what salary would be fair? What boundaries would she need for Phoenix's sake? And most troublingly, would anyone be willing to work with her given her toxic association with Sterling's crimes? The financial industry had a long memory and little forgiveness for scandal, regardless of innocence. She had learned that lesson painfully when former colleagues crossed streets to avoid her, when employment agencies stopped returning her calls, when her impressive resume became worthless overnight. Hence the cleaning job. Anonymous, beneath notice, but honest work that paid just enough to keep a roof over their heads. At 6 a.m., Thalia finally dozed off on the couch, only to be awakened an hour later by Phoenix bouncing beside her, already dressed for school and bubbling with questions about her mysterious meeting. "Will you wear those fancy clothes again? Can I come see your new office if you get one? Will we move back to a building with an elevator?" "Slow down, astronaut," she laughed, running a hand through her disheveled hair. "This is just a meeting. I don't know what will happen yet." But, as she prepared for the day, selecting her one remaining professional outfit, a simple navy dress she'd kept for job interviews that never materialized, Thalia found herself hoping for something she hadn't dared hope for in months: a second chance. Not just for herself, but for Phoenix, who deserved more than macaroni dinners and an apartment with leaky ceilings. After dropping Phoenix at school with promises to tell him everything later, Thalia stood on the curb waiting for Sinclair's car. Her hands smoothed the fabric of her dress nervously, checking for wrinkles or signs of wear. The last time she'd worn it had been for an interview at a mid-tier financial firm 6 months ago, an interview that had ended abruptly when the hiring manager recognized her name midway through. The sleek black car arrived precisely at 8:30. The same driver from yesterday greeted her with a respectful nod. "Good morning, Mrs. Merrick. Mr. Sinclair is looking forward to your meeting." The drive to Sinclair Enterprises felt like traveling through a portal between worlds. Each mile took her further from the life she'd pieced together from the wreckage of Sterling's betrayal, and closer to the possibility of reclaiming some version of her former self. The gleaming skyscrapers of the financial district, once her natural habitat, more recently the buildings she cleaned when their occupants had gone home, loomed larger as they approached. When they arrived, Thalia was surprised to be directed not to the main lobby, but to a private elevator that went directly to the executive floor. Wesley awaited her, his demeanor transformed from yesterday's dismissiveness to almost fawning respect. "Mrs. Merrick, wonderful to see you again. Mr. Sinclair is waiting in the conference room. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Tea? Perhaps something to eat?" "Just water, thank you," she replied, maintaining her professional composure despite the surreal quality of the moment. As they walked through the executive floor, the same floor she had cleaned countless times, emptying trash bins and wiping down surfaces while invisible to the occupants, she felt the curious glances of employees who clearly had heard something about yesterday's events. The conference room door opened to reveal not just Everett Sinclair, but a full contingent of his executive team seated around the table. Talia recognized most of them. She had cleaned their offices after all, though they had rarely, if ever, acknowledged her presence. Now their eyes followed her with intense interest as she took the seat Everett indicated at his right hand. "Mrs. Merrick, thank you for joining us this morning," Everett began formally. "After yesterday's extraordinary demonstration of your capabilities, I've convened my leadership team to discuss a proposition that I believe will be mutually beneficial." Talia nodded, her face a careful mask of professional interest that revealed nothing of her inner turmoil. Whatever came next would either open a door back to the life she had lost or confirm that some falls could not be recovered from, regardless of talent or determination. Either way, Phoenix was waiting for her answer after school, and she would face it with the same resilience that had carried them this far. "We would like to offer you a position at Sinclair Enterprises," Everett continued, sliding a folder across the table. "Not as an employee, but as a partner." Talia's hand hovered over the folder, her composure momentarily fractured by genuine shock. A partner? The words seemed to hang in the air, surreal and impossible. She had walked into this meeting hoping for perhaps a mid-level position, something that would utilize her skills while accommodating her single-parent responsibilities. Partnership had never entered her calculations. "Yes," Everett confirmed, watching her reaction closely. "Specifically, we're offering you a 25% equity stake in Sinclair Enterprises, with the title of Executive Vice President of International Operations." The room fell silent as Talia opened the folder with steady hands that belied her internal turbulence. The documents inside detailed a compensation package that would not only restore her to her former financial standing, but exceed it significantly. Profit sharing, stock options, performance bonuses, health care benefits that would cover Phoenix's asthma treatments without the crushing deductibles of her current bare minimum insurance. She looked up, meeting Everett's gaze directly. "This is extremely generous, Mr. Sinclair, but I have to ask why. You barely know me. One successful negotiation, however crucial, hardly justifies this level of commitment." Everett leaned forward, his expression more open than she had yet seen it. "Before yesterday, Sinclair Enterprises was a respected regional player with solid growth. After your revisions to the Montgomery contract, we're positioned to become a global force with exponential potential." He gestured to the executives around the table. "We spent until midnight analyzing your contributions. The distribution channel innovations alone added $40 million in projected revenue we hadn't conceived of. The regulatory compliance framework you inserted will save us years of legal entanglements. Octavia Harrington called me personally this morning," he continued. "She said, and I quote, 'If you don't hire that woman immediately, I will.' See, that's from someone who, by all accounts, knew your capabilities before recent events." Talia's mind worked furiously, analyzing angles and implications. "My association with Sterling Caldwell's financial crimes could be problematic for your company image. The scandal may have faded from headlines, but in financial circles, the connection remains toxic." An older woman at the far end of the table, Talia recognized her as Sinclair's chief legal officer, spoke up. "We've conducted thorough due diligence overnight. The court records clearly establish your non-involvement and full cooperation with authorities. More importantly, your personal financial records show you liquidated your legal share of assets to make restitution to affected parties, despite having no obligation to do so." Talia tried to mask her surprise. They'd researched her that thoroughly in less than 24 hours? "In fact," the legal officer continued, Your ethical handling of the aftermath enhances rather than detracts from your value to our organization. Integrity under fire is a rare commodity in our industry. Everett nodded in agreement. Rare and valuable. But Mrs. Merrick, while your financial expertise is extraordinary, what truly convinced me was watching you balance that $300 million negotiation with your commitment to make it to your son's school presentation. That demonstrated something beyond professional competence. It showed character and priorities I want associated with this company. Thalia felt something shift inside her, the first genuine emotional crack in the wall she'd built around herself since Sterling's betrayal had destroyed everything. She took a steadying breath. I appreciate the sentiment, Mr. Sinclair, but I need to be pragmatic. I'm a single mother with full responsibility for my son. My previous position required international travel and 60-plus-hour weeks. That's not a model I can or want to replicate, regardless of the financial compensation. Cheat. Which brings me to the second part of our proposal, Everett said, indicating another section of the documents. Flexible working arrangements, including remote work options, controlled travel schedules built around your son's school calendar, and access to the company's family support resources. We've also taken the liberty of researching educational options, added a younger executive whom Thalia recognized as the Human Resources Director. Sinclair has a partnership with Westridge Academy, which has an exceptional science program that might interest your son, given his award-winning project yesterday. The mention of Phoenix's achievement brought a genuine smile to Thalia's face. You've been thorough. We're serious about this partnership, Mrs. Merrick, Everett said, but I sense there's something else holding you back. Thalia closed the folder, gathering her thoughts. The offer was beyond generous. It was life-changing. Yet caution, born from bitter experience, made her hesitant. My former colleagues and business associates abandoned me overnight when Sterling's crimes came to light. People I'd worked with for a decade crossed streets to avoid me. What assurance do I have that when public association with my name becomes problematic? And it will, Mr. Sinclair. You won't make the same calculation they did? The room fell silent. Everett exchanged glances with his team before responding. A fair concern. I propose an unbreakable contractual guarantee. Your equity stake and position are secured against termination for any reason related to past events or public perception thereof. We'll include a substantial penalty clause for breach on our part. I'd also like to add something, Thalia said, her business mind now fully engaged. A community reinvestment initiative. Elite Cleaning Services employs primarily immigrant women. Many single mothers like myself with limited options despite valuable skills and education from their home countries. I'd like Sinclair to establish a professional development program offering language support, certification, and mentoring opportunities. A ripple of surprise moved through the executives, but Everett nodded thoughtfully. Workforce development aligns with our corporate values. We can certainly explore such an initiative. Not explore. Implement. Thalia's voice was firm. With dedicated funding and my direct oversight, many of those women have degrees in finance, engineering, or medicine that aren't recognized here. They clean offices because it's the only option available, not because it's their only capability. Everett studied her for a long moment before a slow smile spread across his face. You're already negotiating like a partner, Mrs. Merrick. I accept your condition. For the first time since entering the room, Thalia felt the tension in her shoulders begin to release. This wasn't charity or pity. This was a business transaction between equals, her skills and expertise in exchange for opportunity and resources. The fact that it would transform her and Phoenix's lives was a consequence, not the primary motivation for either party. I'd like 24 hours to review the documents with my attorney, she said, gathering the folder. Of course, Everett agreed. Though I should mention that Octavia Harrington's team is flying back on Thursday to begin implementation planning for the Montgomery contract. Your insights would be invaluable for that meeting." Thalia nodded, understanding the subtle pressure while appreciating that he'd framed it as a business necessity rather than an ultimatum. "I'll have my decision by tomorrow morning." See, as the meeting concluded and the executives filed out with professional nods of acknowledgement, Everett held back. When they were alone, his formal demeanor softened slightly. "Off the record, Mrs. Merrick, what happened to you was unconscionable. Not just Sterling's crimes, but the industry's reaction to your situation. I witnessed similar treatment of my sister after her ex-husband's bankruptcy scandal. She didn't deserve it, and neither did you." Seats, the unexpected personal disclosure caught Thalia off guard. "Your sister?" "Diane Sinclair Hayes. She was CFO at Meridian Technologies until her ex-husband's poor decisions tainted her by association. Brilliant financial mind, reduced to teaching high school mathematics." His expression hardened momentarily. "The financial industry's double standard for women associated with disgraced men versus the men themselves is something I find personally offensive." With that revelation, pieces clicked into place for Thalia. This wasn't just a business decision for Everett. There was a personal principle at stake as well. That knowledge, oddly, made her more confident in the offer's sincerity than any contractual guarantee could provide. "Thank you for your candor, Mr. Sinclair. Everett, please, if we're to be partners." He extended his hand. She accepted the handshake, her grip firm and professional. Thalia, then. As she left the Sinclair building, this time through the front lobby rather than the service entrance she'd used for months, Thalia felt as though she were walking between worlds. The security guard who had never once looked up from his post when she arrived in her cleaning uniform now nodded respectfully as she passed. The revolving doors deposited her onto the busy downtown sidewalk where suited professionals hurried past, no longer a separate species from her, but potential peers once again. The car waited to take her home, but Thalia asked the driver to make a detour. "Elite Cleaning Services headquarters, please. I have something important to discuss with them." An hour later, she emerged from a surprisingly productive meeting with her soon-to-be former employers. Rather than being defensive about losing their most reliable cleaner, they had been intrigued by her preliminary description of Sinclair's potential professional development program. With proper implementation, it could become a valuable recruitment and retention tool for their most ambitious employees while creating a pipeline of success stories like Thalia's own. By the time she arrived to pick up Phoenix from school, Thalia had made her decision. The equity partnership with Sinclair offered everything they needed: financial security, professional respect, and most importantly, a chance for Phoenix to see his mother reclaim her identity beyond the woman who cleans offices. "How was your meeting, Mom?" Phoenix asked the moment he climbed into the car, his backpack clutched against his chest. "Did you get a new job? Is that why we're in the fancy car again?" Thalia smiled, brushing his unruly hair back from his forehead. "I've been offered a very exciting opportunity, but I wanted to discuss it with you before making my final decision." Phoenix's eyes widened. "With me? But I'm just a kid." "You're not just anything, Phoenix. You're my partner in everything important." She turned to face him fully. "The job would mean changes for both of us. We could move to a better apartment. You could attend a school with an amazing science program, and I'd be doing work that uses all my experience and education." "Oh, like before Dad went away?" he asked carefully. They rarely spoke directly about Sterling, a topic still raw for both of them. Similar, but with important differences. "I would be a partner in the company, which means more control over my schedule, and I've made sure that I won't have to travel when you have important events." She hesitated, then added the part that concerned her most. "But people might start recognizing our name again, talking about what happened with Dad. That could be hard sometimes." Phoenix considered this with surprising maturity for an 8-year-old. "Would you be happier? You don't smile much when you come home from cleaning." The simple observation struck Thalia deeply. She had tried so hard to shield Phoenix from her struggles, to present a positive front regardless of her exhaustion or disappointment. Yet children saw more than adults, often credited. "I think I would be much happier using my brain the way I used to," she admitted. "But your happiness matters most to me, so I want to know how you feel about these changes." Phoenix was quiet for a long moment, his expression serious as he processed everything. Finally, he looked up with the gap-toothed smile that never failed to melt her heart. "I think you should take the job, Mom. And I think we should get ice cream again to celebrate." Thalia laughed, feeling lighter than she had in months. "Ice cream 2 days in a row? That's pushing it, young man." "We're celebrating 2 days in a row," he countered, with the negotiating skills he'd clearly inherited from her. "Yesterday was my science project, and today is your new job. Partnership," she corrected gently. "And you drive a hard bargain, but I accept your terms." As they detoured for their second celebratory ice cream in 24 hours, Thalia's phone chimed with a message from Everett. Decision made, Octavia's team arriving earlier than expected. Thursday morning meeting now critical. She typed her response with one hand, while Phoenix debated between chocolate and strawberry. "I accept the partnership offer, with the conditions discussed. Available to start immediately. We'll sign tomorrow." The reply came almost instantly. "Excellent. Car will pick you up at 8 a.m. Welcome to Sinclair Enterprises, partner." Partner. The word resonated with meaning beyond its corporate definition. For the first time since Sterling's betrayal had collapsed her carefully constructed life, Thalia felt she was no longer facing the world alone. She had Phoenix, of course, her most important partnership, but now she also had professional allies who valued her talents enough to look beyond the scandal that had unfairly defined her. As she watched Phoenix happily devour his double-scoop ice cream cone, chocolate and strawberry, he'd negotiated an upgrade, Thalia realized they were standing at the threshold of a new chapter. The cleaning uniform would be exchanged for business attire, the minimum wage job for an executive partnership, the struggling single mother identity for something more complex and empowered. The past couldn't be erased, but perhaps it could finally recede into its proper perspective, a painful chapter rather than the entire story. "Mom," Phoenix said, ice cream smeared across his chin, "does this mean I can have a telescope again? Or astronomy?" Thalia wiped his face with a napkin, smiling at the reminder of his passion for space. "Yes, I think a new telescope is definitely in our future. And can we go to space camp next summer? My friend Jacob went last year and built a real robot." "We'll see," she laughed, realizing that Phoenix had been keeping a mental list of dreams deferred during their months of financial struggle. "One step at a time, astronaut." But as they walked back to the car hand in hand, Thalia knew that after so many months of saying no, and not now, and maybe someday, it felt extraordinarily good to contemplate a future where yes was once again possible. 6 months later, Thalia stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her new office on the 42nd floor, watching the city lights flicker to life as dusk descended. The Sinclair Enterprises logo illuminated the opposite skyscraper, its blue glow a testament to the company's expanding presence in the international market. She adjusted the collar of her tailored charcoal suit, no longer borrowed, but one of many that now filled her closet at the spacious 3-bedroom condominium she and Phoenix called home. "Mrs. Merrick?" Her assistant's voice came through the intercom. "The Montgomery implementation team is assembled in Conference Room A. And your son's school called. The Science Fair Awards ceremony will begin at 7:30 as scheduled. Thank you, Elise. Please let the team know I'll be there in 5 minutes." Thalia checked her watch, a sleek timepiece that had been Everett's gift to mark her first successful quarter as partner. She had exactly 90 minutes to conclude this meeting before needing to leave for Phoenix's ceremony. The carefully balanced choreography of her professional and personal responsibilities had become second nature over the past 6 months, but tonight held special significance on both fronts. The Montgomery contract, which had catalyzed her extraordinary return to the financial world, was now fully implemented across 3 continents. Under her direction, what had begun as a $300 million deal had expanded to nearly $500 million in projected annual revenue. Sinclair Enterprises' stock had risen 32% since the partnership announcement, and tonight's implementation review would close the final chapter on the project that had changed everything. More personally, Phoenix would be receiving recognition for his advanced placement in the prestigious Westridge Academy Science Program, the youngest student ever granted such an honor. His telescope, a housewarming gift from Thalia when they moved into their new home, had inspired an astronomy project that had captured the attention of university researchers. The boy who had once feared mentioning his mother's previous career was now proudly telling classmates, "My mom runs international business deals and helps people find their talents." Thalia gathered her presentation materials, including the final report on the Elite Professional Development Initiative, the program she had insisted upon as a condition of her partnership. In 6 months, the program had already helped 12 women transition from cleaning services to professional roles aligned with their education and experience. Tonight, she would present the initiative's expansion proposal to the executive committee, with funding to support 50 participants annually. As she prepared to leave her office, Thalia's gaze fell on the framed photograph on her desk. Phoenix at the launch of the development program, standing proudly beside her as she cut the ribbon. Beside it sat a small plaque, engraved with words that had become her personal mantra: "Talent finds a way." The conference room fell silent as Thalia entered. 20 executives from 3 countries rose respectfully, a stark contrast to the invisibility she had experienced in these same rooms 6 months earlier. Among them sat Octavia Harrington, who had flown in specifically for this meeting and who now offered Thalia a warm smile of professional admiration. "Thank you all for your commitment to this project," Thalia began, her voice confident and measured. "Tonight, we mark not just the successful implementation of the Montgomery contract, but the beginning of Sinclair Enterprises' transformation into a truly global organization." The presentation proceeded with precision, each team reporting their milestones achieved and challenges overcome. Thalia moderated with the practiced ease of someone who had conducted countless such meetings throughout her career, asking incisive questions and offering strategic insights that demonstrated her comprehensive grasp of every aspect of the business. "Before we conclude," Thalia said as the formal agenda items were completed, "I'd like to present a brief update on the Elite Professional Development Initiative." She distributed folders containing program statistics and participant profiles. "As you'll see, our first cohort has already generated measurable returns on investment. These individuals bring linguistic capabilities, cultural insights, and technical expertise that have directly enhanced our international operations." Everett, seated at the opposite end of the table, nodded appreciatively. "The Rodriguez proposal for the Latin American expansion might never have materialized without Maria's insights," he acknowledged, referring to a former cleaner who now served as a regional market analyst. "Her understanding of local business practices gave us a significant advantage in negotiations." "Precisely," Thalia agreed, "which is why I'm proposing we expand the initiative as outlined in Section 3. The talent pipeline we're creating offers Sinclair access to perspectives and capabilities our competitors can't match." The discussion that followed was engaging and substantive, with executives building upon Thalia's proposal with their own suggestions for enhancement. As the meeting concluded with unanimous approval for the expansion, Octavia approached Thalia privately. "You've done remarkable work here," the British executive said, her crisp accent softened by genuine admiration. "When we reconnected 6 months ago, I hoped you would recover your rightful place in this industry. But you've done far more than that. You've redefined what's possible." Thalia accepted the compliment with gracious professionalism. "Thank you, Octavia. Your support has meant a great deal." "I've been meaning to ask," Octavia continued, lowering her voice slightly. "Have you heard anything from Sterling recently? There were rumors he'd been located in Argentina." A familiar tension flickered briefly across Thalia's shoulders at the mention of her ex-husband's name, but it dissipated almost immediately. "The authorities are handling that situation. My focus remains here, on building something sustainable and meaningful." Octavia nodded approvingly. "The best revenge, as they say." "Not revenge," Thalia corrected gently. "Redemption. For myself and for others who deserve a second chance." As the executives dispersed, Everett fell into step beside her as they walked toward the elevator. "The board is extremely pleased with the quarterly projections," he commented. "Your international strategy has positioned us years ahead of our original growth timeline." "The fundamentals were solid," Thalia acknowledged. "It just needed the right connections and cultural approach." Everett chuckled, always deflecting praise. "One of these days, you'll have to accept that your contribution has been transformative." He checked his watch. "Aren't you due at Phoenix's ceremony soon? Take my helicopter. The traffic will be impossible this time of evening." Thalia smiled gratefully. "That would be helpful, thank you." Boy, such offers no longer surprised her. The transition from cleaning staff to executive partner had included countless adjustments, from using corporate transportation to managing a support team to having her opinions not merely heard, but actively sought after. 30 minutes later, the helicopter touched down on the private landing pad near Westridge Academy. As Thalia walked briskly toward the school auditorium, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. 6 months ago, she had been cleaning these very hallways during a temporary assignment when Elite rotated their staff between locations. Now she was a major donor and advisory board member, using her influence to ensure the school's scholarship program included children from backgrounds similar to Phoenix's. She slipped quietly into the auditorium just as the ceremony began, finding her reserved seat in the front row. Phoenix, seated on stage with the other honorees, spotted her immediately. The small, secret wave he offered was for her alone, their private acknowledgement that no professional obligation would ever again take precedence over these milestone moments. As Phoenix's name was called, and he stepped forward to receive his award, Thalia felt a swell of emotion that transcended pride. This bright, resilient boy had weathered the collapse of his family, the loss of financial security, and the strain of starting over in circumstances that would have broken many adults. Yet, he had emerged not merely intact, but flourishing, his natural brilliance nurtured by her fierce determination that their setbacks would be temporary, not defining. The ceremony concluded with a reception in the school's grand atrium. As Thalia circulated among the other parents and faculty, she found herself approached by a woman she recognized immediately, Mrs. Howell, Phoenix's teacher from their previous school. "Mrs. Merrick, Phoenix invited me specially." The teacher beamed. "I can hardly believe the transformation. He's absolutely thriving here." "He still talks about your class," Thalia replied warmly. "You encouraged his interest in science when we needed that support most." Mrs. Howell lowered her voice. "I hope you don't mind my saying so, but your journey has been inspiring to many of us. When you would come to school events straight from your cleaning job, still in uniform, but never missing a single important moment in Phoenix's life that showed remarkable character." Thalia felt a momentary tightness in her throat. "We all do what's necessary for our children." "Yes, but not everyone does it with such grace," Mrs. Howell insisted. "And now, to see you restored to the professional position you deserve, it reminds us all that life's setbacks need not be permanent." Before Thalia could respond, Phoenix bounded over, his award clutched proudly in one hand. "Mom, Professor Jenkins wants to talk to you about my asteroid tracking project. He says it has commercial applications." His excitement was infectious, scientific terminology rolling off his tongue with ease. "Lead the way, astronaut," Thalia smiled, excusing herself from Mrs. Howell. The conversation with Professor Jenkins, a renowned astrophysicist who served as special advisor to the school's science department, was yet another reminder of how dramatically their circumstances had changed. The professor spoke enthusiastically about Phoenix's potential, outlining advanced coursework and mentorship opportunities that would nurture his exceptional talents. "He reminds me of myself at that age," the professor confided. "That rare combination of creativity and analytical thinking. With the right guidance, there's no limit to what he might accomplish." Later, as they traveled home in the corporate car that had become a standard part of their daily routine, Phoenix chattered excitedly about the upcoming science symposium where he would present his project. Thalia listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that demonstrated her engagement with his interests. "Mom?" Phoenix's tone suddenly shifted, becoming more reflective. "Remember when you used to clean that school? When you'd come to my presentations in your pink uniform?" Thalia nodded, curious where this was leading. "Of course. I was never embarrassed, you know." His young face was solemn in the dim light of the car. "Some kids made fun of me because you were a cleaner, but I told them you were the smartest person I knew, just waiting for your chance to show everyone." Emotion welled in Thalia's chest, a complex mixture of pain for what they'd endured and profound gratitude for this remarkable child. "That means more to me than you can possibly understand, Phoenix. I knew you'd be important again someday," he continued with the simple certainty of childhood. "But you were always important to me, even when you were cleaning." Thalia pulled him close, her professional composure momentarily set aside as she embraced her son. "And you, Phoenix Merrick, have always been the most important person in my world, no matter what job I had or will ever have." When they arrived home, a package awaited them in the lobby of their luxury building. The return address showed it was from the first participant in the Elite Professional Development Initiative, Maria Rodriguez, the former cleaner now thriving as a market analyst. Inside their spacious condominium, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city they had once viewed from a cramped apartment with leaking ceilings, Thalia opened the package while Phoenix prepared for bed. Inside was a beautifully framed photograph of the first cohort of program participants at their graduation ceremony, all women who had transitioned from cleaning services to professional roles. A handwritten note accompanied the gift. "Thalia, because of you, my daughter now says she wants to be a businesswoman instead of a princess. You've changed more lives than you know. With eternal gratitude, Maria." Thalia traced her fingers over the faces in the photograph, women whose stories paralleled her own, whose talents had been obscured by circumstance rather than ability. In each face, she recognized the same determination that had carried her through the darkest moments after Sterling's betrayal, the same hope that had prompted her to speak up that fateful day when Everett Sinclair needed a translator. A noise from Phoenix's bedroom drew her attention. She found him at his window with his telescope, already in pajamas but clearly not ready for sleep. "One quick look at Jupiter before bed?" she asked, recognizing the familiar setup. "Actually," Phoenix said, without looking away from the eyepiece, "I found something else. Come see." Thalia knelt beside him, accepting the telescope adjustment. Through the powerful lens, a cluster of stars shimmered against the velvet backdrop of the night sky. "It's called the Phoenix Cluster," her son explained proudly. "Professor Jenkins helped me locate it. It's named after a mythical bird that rises from its own ashes to be reborn stronger than before." He looked at her with eyes wise beyond his years. "Just like us, Mom." In that perfect moment, with the city lights spread below them and the infinite stars above, Thalia felt the full circle of their journey. From the devastating collapse of her career and marriage, to cleaning offices in the shadows, and now to this new life built on reclaimed confidence and hard-won wisdom. Not merely a restoration of what was lost, but the creation of something far more precious, a life defined by authenticity, resilience, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and son who had faced adversity together and emerged stronger for it. "Just like us," she agreed softly, wrapping her arm around his shoulders as they gazed at their namesake constellation, rising stronger every day. The next morning, as Thalia prepared for a meeting with international investors, her phone chimed with a message from Everett. "Board vote unanimous. Professional Development Initiative approved for global expansion. Your vision is now company policy." She smiled, tucking the phone away as she helped Phoenix gather his school materials. This was the true measure of her comeback. Not the corner office or executive title, but the power to hold open doors for others still cleaning in the shadows, waiting for their moment to shine. And as she watched her son bound enthusiastically toward the future they had rebuilt together, Thalia knew with absolute certainty that some falls were not endings but beginnings, painful but necessary redirections toward the lives they were truly meant to live. The universe had taken everything from Thalia Merrick, only to return it, transformed and multiplied. The cleaning lady had reclaimed her rightful place in the world, bringing with her the compassion, humility, and wisdom that only comes from having viewed life from both the penthouse and the service entrance. And in that knowledge lived a power greater than any she had possessed before, the unshakable certainty that talent, determination, and integrity would always find their way back to the light. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below. What city are you watching from? And if your heart tells you to, feel free to leave me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Just check the first pinned comment. Thanks for keeping me company and for the coffee, and I'll see you in the next story.